The last of the Serpent Kings of Cyrodiil is dead, murdered within the walls of his own palace. And even before the Snake Emperor's lifeblood had been washed away, the grasping lords of the land smelled opportunity in the air. Most promising of these ambitious men was Cuhlecain, king of Falkreath. Cuhlecain united the quarrelsome Colovian lords and worked on consolidating his expanding domain. Securing his northern border was no easy task, but the king had a secret weapon, a young warrior named Hjalti Earlybeard. Hjalti rapidly rose the ranks of Cuhlecain's army and became his foremost general. The Battle of Old Hroldan would be Hjalti's proving ground, for his achievements in the Reach would be immortalized in legend, the first step of his rise from man to ruler to god. War gripped the Western Reach, but Hjalti's men, consisting of Colovian soldiers and Nordic berserkers, ravaged the Reachman lines and forced the savages to retreat to their last significant stronghold, Old Hroldan. The Witchmen jeered from behind the safety of their palisades, and the attackers, unaccustomed to such obstacles, looked to their young general for answers. Hjalti stroked his beard. He was a shrewd tactician, but a siege would be impossible, for his men could expect neither supplies nor reinforcements from Falkreath. His king was preoccupied in the south, so it fell upon him alone to solve this conundrum. That night, Hjalti retreated to his tent to ponder his options. He was deep in thought when the storm came. Rain thrashed the camp, and streaks of lightning veined the night sky, bringing ephemeral flashes of daylight upon them. One particularly turbulent storm cloud descended from the sky and entered the general's tent. The cloud spoke with a voice like rolling thunder, interspersed with sudden exclaimed cracks and flashes. The two conversed until dawn, and when day finally broke, the storm dispersed, leaving only the tempest within Hjalti's tent. The general emerged with the tenebrous cloud shrouding his head, and the warriors parted for him. Like leaves caught in the wake of a gale, they formed a procession behind their leader, and followed him to the gates of Old Hroldan. The Witchman arrows could not penetrate the winds that whirled around Hjalti. There was a moment of anxious silence when the storm-swathed general stopped before the heavy oak gates. A violent crack of thunder burst from Hjalti's throat. He shouted down the walls of the impenetrable stronghold, and with a war cry that shook the very foundations of Nirn, the army poured into Old Hroldan. The defenseless Reachmen died in droves. The victory was absolute, and Hjalti Earlybeard was given a new moniker, one that would ring through the heavens ever after. They called him Talos Stormcrown, the Dragon of the North, the Grey Wind, the Storm of Kine. But there are other titles that some heretics would bestow upon the mighty Talos instead. Titles like Traitor, Murderer, and Fraud. Word of Talos' deeds spread fast across the West, leading Cuhlecain's rivals to consider the unthinkable, an alliance. In order to quash the strongest of the contenders for the Ruby Throne, the lesser lords of Colovia and High Rock unified their armies, and a decisive battle took place at the Golden Hill of Sancretor. This was arguably the most consequential of all the conflicts leading to Cuhlecain's inevitable ascension. With the opposing armies locked in battle, General Talos infiltrated the ancient fortress, blasting down the defences with his Thum. When the Nordic leaders heard Talos' voice, they defected to his side, for according to their folklore, he must be a son of Skyrim, and the heir to the empires of men. Talos captured the remaining Breton leaders who had been foolish enough to face him, and fearing that the Storm of Kine would eviscerate them with a mighty shout, the leaders ordered their troops to surrender, and the day went to Cuhlecain. When Talos emerged from Sancretor, he did so with the long-dormant Amulet of Kings draped around his neck. Next came the Battle of Five Bridges. With counsel from the battle mage Zurin Arctus, Talos defeated an army twice the size of his own, and within 2 years of acquiring the title of Stormcrown, the Grey Wind had carried Cuhlecain all the way to the Imperial City. The Nibonese battle mages occupying the capital soon capitulated to Cuhlecain, fearing the wrath of his general. And this is where the true ruthlessness of Talos Stormcrown is revealed. King Cuhlecain had achieved the impossible, and on the morrow he would be crowned emperor. Only that night, tragedy struck. Or was it treachery? The histories would have you believe that Cuhlecain's Breton rivals orchestrated his downfall, It is well documented that somehow a Nightblade from the Western Reach crept into the city and assassinated the Emperor-to-be on the eve of his coronation. The vengeance was total, for the Nightblade also set the Imperial Palace ablaze and slit General Talos' throat. Only the Storm of Kine survived. The Pocket Guide to the Empire provides a stirring account of the aftermath, an account that would solidify Talos' heroic claim to the ultimate title of the Cyrodiilic Empire. It reads, "But from the smouldering ruin he came, one hand to his neck and with Cuhlecain's crown in the other. The legions wept at the sight. His northern magic had saved him, but the voice that led them would be more silent from that night on. His word could no longer rout an army with a roar, but he could still command one with a whisper. He took for himself a Cyrodiilic name, Tiber Septim, and the Nordic name of kings, Ysmir, the Dragon of the North. And with those names he took too the red diamond crown of the Cyrodiils, and became their true emperor. It's a real tale of heroism, one that could unite the fractious factions of Tamriel's human provinces. He hailed from High Rock as Hjalti Earlybeard, which endeared him to the Bretons, albeit begrudgingly. He was also Dragonborn, a powerful tongue, chosen by the Greybeards to wield the voice against his enemies. Thus he was well loved by the Nords. And finally, in defying death and succeeding Cuhlecain, taking the name Tiber Septim in the process, he seemed to be a product of destiny for the Imperials, and the Imperials were weary from 4 centuries of unrest. This is the first instance of Talos' triality, one man with 3 faces, and this will become a recurring motif for the hero god of mankind. Tiber Septim was crowned in Cuhlecain's place by none other than the Imperial battle mage Zurin Arctus. But isn't it all just too perfect? There is an alternate hypothesis about Talos' rise to the Ruby Throne that shows the beloved Emperor's dark side. Hjalti Earlybeard was a formidable fighter and an excellent leader, especially considering his age. But are we to believe that this young general discovered the legendary power of the voice right when he needed it most? Well, some sources actually never mention Hjalti at all. They claim that Talos was always named Talos, and Cuhlecain had recruited him from Atmora. This would mean Hjalti Tiber Talos was a Nord, not a Breton. According to the Song of Tiber Septim, as recorded in the first edition of the Pocket Guide to the Empire, he was born in Atmora as Talos, Stormcrown in the language of the ancient Elnafey, and it was from that shore he sailed. He spent his youth in Skyrim among the Nords. There he learned much from the tongues and their chieftains and their ways of war. Soon the Greybeards made known that they were restless. Already the storms had begun from their murmurs. The Greybeards were going to speak. The surrounding villages were abandoned as the people fled the coming blast. The villagers warned Talos to turn back, for he was marching to the mountain where the Greybeards dwelt. Inside he went, and on seeing him they removed their gags. When they spoke his name, the world shook. The tongues of Skyrim told the son of Atmora that he had come to rule Tamriel, and that he must travel south to do so. And it is true that Talos did come to Cyrodiil shortly after the Battle of Old Hroldan, and it is true that a great storm preceded his arrival. But this account, though poetic, is far too convenient. It requires one to ignore some other pivotal parts of Talos' story. Also, the ghost of Old Hroldan even tells the Dragonborn that he is awaiting the return of a warrior named Hjalti, a warrior he trained with in the region of Alcair in High Rock. I will preface, every source that weighs in on the life and legacy of the many-headed Talos is compromised in some way. Imperial texts that espouse him as some prophesied hero in the ilk of Alesia and Riemann clearly have their reasons for doing so, and the primary heretical libelous text castigating him was likely written by his former Imperial battle mage, Zurin Arctus. I won't dwell too long on the sources that laud Talos as an exalted and infallible emperor god, because this is already the commonly held perception of him, and if you wish to dismiss his critics, then you're well within your rights to do so. But allow me to elaborate on the discrepancies in Talos' seemingly perfect rise from man to monarch to immortal. Vivec's 19th sermon states, Vivec then saw the moths that would come from the starry heart, bringing with them dust more horrible than the ash of Red Mountain. He saw the twin head of a ruling king who had no equivalent, and 8 imperfections rubbed into precious stones, set into a crown that looked like shackles, which he understood to be the twin crowns of the two-headed king, and a river that fed into the mouth of the two-headed king because he contained multitudes. This excerpt raises as many questions as it answers, but it draws attention to a recurring theme within the Empire. When the slave queen Alesia canonized her new religion, the 8 divines, she combined aspects of Shor, the god of men, with Auriel, the god of time, creating Akatosh. This is the two-headed king of Cyrodiil, the Starry Heart. But this excerpt is also a reference to Talos, for he is the combination of Hjalti and another being, and Vivec sees that he will be a destructive and dominating force on Tamriel, named Tiber Septim. So, other than the man we know as Hjalti, who else comprises the many-headed Talos? This is where we turn to the infamous account of the Underking, whose identity we shall discuss soon. The Arcturian heresy lays it all bare. The storm cloud that visited Hjalti in his tent on the eve of his legendary victory at Old Hroldan was the ancient Ash King, Ysmir Wulfharth. Wulfharth was once a mortal man, but became a returning ashen spirit, who carries out Shor's will on Nirn as a Shezarene. The text titled The 5 Songs of King Wulfharth states, his Fum was so powerful that he could not verbally swear into the office, and scribes were used to draw up his oaths. In life, he restored the traditional Nordic pantheon to Skyrim, destroying the temples of the Elysian 8 divines. He drove the Dureni elves out of the north. He fought the orcs and shouted their chief into oblivion. In war, he swallowed thunderclouds to prevent his armies from catching colds. His legacy is long and mixes myth and reality until the two are indistinguishable. When he died, the flames of his pyre were said to have reached the hearth of Kyne itself. He was reborn from the ashes to fight the devils at Red Mountain, hoping to recover Shor's heart. But he was blasted to dust by Vivec, and then he returned from the ash once again to fend off an Akaviri invasion. After this, his spirit rode the winds for some 300 years. Remember when the Greybeards made the world shake in announcing the new ruler of men? Well, the Arcturian heresy says that this great quaking awoke the Ash King. Wulfharth, though, was denied by the Greybeards and blasted back to ash again. The Greybeards warned Wulfharth, telling him to beware the colour of betrayal. But the Ash King was long gone, for he rode the winds once more in search of the Breton boy destined to rule Tamriel. And this is where the first 2 heads of Talos meet. Wulfharth entered Hjalti's tent as a portentous cloud. With the spirit of the Ash King shrouding his head, Hjalti shouted down the walls of Old Hroldan and adopted all of the titles that had once been given to Wulfharth. Ysmir, Dragon of the North, the Grey Wind, the Storm of Kyne. If we subscribe to the idea that Hjalti could never use the Fum and relied on his literal storm crown to channel the voice through Wulfharth, then we have the final motive in place for the great assassination conspiracy. Cuhlecain's death on the eve of his coronation was tragic, but also perfect for Hjalti and Wulfharth's ambitions. Talos was told by the Greybeards that he was destined to unite and rule Tamriel, and thanks to some Breton Nightblade assassin, Talos was now heir apparent. But what about the fact that Talos had his throat slit? Surely, if Talos had betrayed Cuhlecain, he would come through unscathed. Well, let's humour the conspiracy. Hjalti knew he could not rely on having Wulfharth with him at all times to perform shouts. But if the people heard the tale of Talos surviving the assassination with a slit throat, then he would not only be heralded as a hero, but he would also have the perfect excuse never to need to shout again. Consider that for a moment. Tiber Septim was potentially the best known of the Dragonborn emperors, yet the songs only sing of him using the storm voice at Old Hroldan, and then again at Sancre Tor. That's it. Unless the Nightblade only wished to shave Hjalti's early beard, then there is no chance he should be surviving. Perhaps the Nightblade never existed, and Talos chose to blame his own deception on the kingdoms of High Rock, Cuhlecain's adversaries. By faking the wound and keeping bandages around his throat, Talos could both claim the crown and never have to prove his mastery of the voice again. It is said that from that day, Talos ruled Tamriel with a whisper. Whether whispering or shouting, there is no denying that Talos, aka Hjalti, aka Ysmir, aka Tiber Septim, with the aid of his chief counsellor Zurin Arctus, governed his empire with great success. He began his Tiber Wars with the sole purpose of uniting Tamriel under one banner, and to some extent that's exactly what he achieved. Blackmarsh was politically annexed, but the region could never truly be tamed, and the Argonians would never acknowledge foreign rule. Morrowind too never actually yielded, but Wulfharth was adamant about avenging his defeat at the hands of the warrior poet Vivec over 2 millennia ago. With their demigod leaders, Morrowind was too powerful to conquer, so the 2 Titan provinces reached peace terms instead. But it was in agreeing to this armistice that Talos took the final step toward carrying out Shor's will, crushing the proud Ultima and ushering in an era of human supremacy. Morrowind maintained their traditions and religious freedoms, while Tiber Septim acquired the Numidium. But the Ash King was furious at Septim's compromise, for he was determined to punish the tribunal for stealing Shor's divinity. With the mighty brass god at his disposal, Tiber Septim crossed the Abetian Sea and laid siege to the capital city of Alinor. The specific details of how the Empire defeated Somerset is not documented, but various sources hint that it was only possible with the help of the Numidium. One of Daggerfall's Mantella-revealed letters states that the Numidium was Tiber Septim's secret weapon in his bid for supreme power, a 1,000-foot-tall automaton, a golem or an atronach of sorts, powered by a gem called the Mantella. And this brings us to Hjalti Talos Tiber's ultimate fraudulent betrayal, even more ruthlessly cutthroat than his alleged theft of the Cyrodiilic throne. Kagranak's original designs for the brass god involved a power source of divine proportions. He intended to use the heart of Lorkhan. Tiber Septim had acquired the pieces of the Numidium, but not the power source, which was being jealously guarded by the Devil of Dagoth. So, Septim tasked his most trusted man with reassembling the tower and researching the ancient Dwemer secret to galvanizing it to life. Arctus discovered a wealth of hidden knowledge, but he worked from incomplete sources. It seems, according to the Arcturian heresy, that a great misunderstanding took place. We know that the Heart of Lorkhan was chosen to power the Numidium, but the Imperial Battle Mage did not understand that it specifically required the heart, and instead believed it required Lorkhan's body. This finding was reported to Tiber Septim, and then the pieces fell into place. It all made sense. He was destined to attain the brass god. He was destined to share a crown with the Ash King, for Wulfharth was an aspect of Lorkhan, a Shezarene. Talos subsequently schemed to betray his storm crown. Tiber Septim summoned the Ash King, telling him that he was right all along about the need to destroy the tribunal. Ysmir Wulfharth possessed a very potent spirit, and no ordinary soul gem would suffice. But Zurin Arctus had discovered the perfect receptacle, a massive green gem called the Mantella. When the Ash King arrived, he was ambushed by Imperial guards, and Arctus brandished the Mantella. With his last breath, Ysmir Kingmaker's heart roared a hole through the battle mage's chest. The guards were vanquished by the fallout, and Tiber Septim was the only survivor. It seems Arctus and Wulfharth's soul powered the Mantella, and since Talos was the only witness, he could spin a story about treachery and treason. The Elder Council arrived, and Septim told them of the second attempt on his life. His loyal battle mage had plotted a coup, but was thwarted by those gallant guards who lay dead and speechless on the ground. Ysmir Wulfharth might have been an avatar of Lorkhan, but he was not Lorkhan. Thus, the newly charged Numidium was not powerful enough to realise the potential the dwarves had intended for it. However, it was powerful enough to subdue Somerset and complete the unification of Tamriel under one man. After the conquest, the Numidium was shouted to pieces by a mysterious undead wizard, a rotting king of sky and storms. Sound familiar? And the Mantella was lost at the bottom of the sea. The Arcturian heresy says, Tiber Septim crowns himself the first emperor of Tamriel. He lives until he's 108, the richest man in history. All aspects of his early reign are rewritten. Still, there are conflicting reports of what really happened, and this is why there is such confusion over such questions as, why does Alcair claim to be the birthplace of Talos, while other sources say he came from Atmora? Why does Tiber Septim seem to be a different person after his first roaring conquests? Why does Tiber Septim betray his battle mage? Is the Mantella the heart of the battle mage, or is it the heart of Tiber Septim? Alas, there is no one veritable account of Tiber Septim's apotheosis. One could argue that, like Riemann Cyrodiil before him, Tiber Septim merely ascended to the status of cultural god-hero of mankind. Some sources, like the anonymously penned Mantella-revealed letters, state that during the battle that destroyed the Numidium, Tiber Septim and the Imperial Battle Mage's shared heart was blown out of this reality into the netherworld they call Aetherius. But how can that be when Tiber Septim lived to declare the beginning of the new era, and his reign lasted another 40 years? I believe that Hjalti Earlybeard and Tiber Septim did not ascend to godhood, at least not alone. I believe it is the tri-headed Talos that became a god. With one Breton, Hjalti, one Nord, Ysmir, and one Imperial, Arctus, Talos became the new spirit of man, taking Lorkhan's place in the pantheon of the 8, now 9 divines. Lorkhan Shazar had been swept under the gold-trimmed rug when Elysia created the cosmopolitan Cyrodiilic Empire. I've always theorized that aspects of Shor were combined with Auriel when Elysia introduced Akatosh as the chief of the Pantheon. But with the rise of Talos, humankind once again had their representative in Tamriel's preeminent religion. This is one of the core reasons the elves despise Talos so much. With the intellect of Arctus, the heroic leadership of Tiber Septim, and Wolfhearth, who was an aspect of Shor, Talos possessed the elements necessary to create a god that all the Tamrielic races of man could rally behind. Perhaps that is why we see Talos piercing the serpent with his sword. Lorkhan is often portrayed as a snake, and Talos has taken his place in the cosmos, and in the hearts and minds of men. It is possible that Talos was but one man. It is possible that Ysmir did not provide him with his signature storm crown, and that Arctus powered the Numidium without the Shezarene. But there are countless blemishes on Talos' list of legendary accomplishments, and for that reason, I assert to you, dear listener, that the man we know as Talos or Tiber Septim would have achieved nothing without his other heads, and therefore he is a fraud. May Heimskir strike the head from my shoulders for such blasphemy. And there you have it, guys. The many-headed Talos is one of the greatest conundrums in the Elder Scrolls universe, so I'd love to hear your thoughts and theories. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. My name is Drew, you've been watching Drew Mora, and I'll see you in the next one.